there's two ways that you can go wrong. You can go with someone that's really, really experienced that you think would be a great asset, but what you find is that they don't want to change. Believe it or not, as you start to grow, the business starts to grow. Like there's more people out there that you can touch, there's more lives that you can make a difference in. You hear that little, if you build it, they'll come kind of situation. That's not necessarily the case, but you definitely have to build yourself and put yourself in a position to grow.
What's the single binding constraint for you would allow you to maybe get 20 clinics, maybe possibly in a shorter period of time? Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome back to Clinic Growth Secrets. I'm your host, Jeff Van Kampen. Now, this gentleman I have on today's show, he served as a U.S. Army officer, retiring as a major after 3 wartime operations, and then went on to build a very fast-growing physical therapy organization. And what I respect most about his story, as you'll hear today, is that he just didn't bring discipline into the business. He brought standards. And so in year 3 of business, this gentleman was growing, and the clinics were busy, but the expenses were rising just as fast, and that's where most owners get stuck. So instead of pushing harder, what this gentleman did was restructured how he marketed, hired, and how he led. And now he's on a mission to build 20 clinics by 2030, opening 1 new location every quarter without sacrificing the quality or the culture inside the business. Now, I'm excited to have him, and you're going to get a lot from this gentleman today. But if you guys know anything about the show, you know the following, and that is we don't run ads and we don't do sponsors. Okay, the price of admission is very simple on the show. If the episode helps you, share it. Send it to a clinic owner who needs to hear about it. And that's how the show grows, is organically and through word of mouth. And now, my friends, I'm excited to welcome today's guest, Dr. Sterling Carter, founder of Sterling Physical Therapy and Wellness. Dr. Sterling, welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you, Jeff. It's an honor to be here. How are you?
I'm exceptional, sir. We're really excited to have you. And so as we get into the goods today, you want to give everyone just a quick 60-second version, Army officer to clinic owner version, and then of a bio, rather, I should say, to be clear. And then we'll get straight to the money.
Okay, sure. So, again, thank you for that great introduction. You pretty much kind of summed the whole story up within a nutshell. But I'm Texas born. I grew up here in Houston, Texas. My parents are from Mississippi, but was a single parent. My dad actually, ironically, we were talking about the war in Vietnam earlier. My dad was a Vietnam vet, and due to PTSD and some addictions, he ended up passing away when we were younger. And I say we were younger because I have a twin brother. But long story short, my mom was a single parent, and when it was time to go to college, she said, "Okay, we can't really afford to pay for this on your own. So guess what? The military is going to help you pay for school." So my brother and I joined the Army just right out of high school, and so spent 25 years in and started off as a combat medic. And then when I finished up my degree, because a lot of that time was reserve time, so we would go 1 weekend a month, etc. Then I commissioned over and became an officer. Became an executive officer, a commander. I ran a couple of different hospitals. Um, Learned a lot in the military just about leadership, servant leadership, taking care of soldiers and being selfless. And I think, well, I don't even think, I know all of that carried over to how I lead in private practice. So, 2007, 2008, I decided actually I was coming back from Germany and had all this time on my hands serving during Operation Enduring Freedom. I won't say a lot of time, but it was some free time, and it wrote up a business plan. And so when I made it back and got back here to the States, I started up my first private practice. So yeah, as they say, the rest is history. It's been a fun ride.
That's awesome, brother. It's cool to be able to take a lot of those lessons and directly apply them to business. I know that the war in business in terms of team sports and the games have always been very highly compared, and you seem to bring a lot of discipline to what you do in all areas of life. And you mentioned too, I always like to begin not so much with the upside. Obviously you want to build 20 locations by 2030, but a little bit of the downside. So you'd mentioned that year 3 the revenue of your practice was kind of it was growing, but the expenses were growing at a higher rate. And so it sounded like you had to make some changes. And I want to go back to that moment where you realized that, the growth alone wasn't the win. You had to actually make profit. So like what specifically broke for you there? What did you feel like you had to change early on?
Great question. Well, first I would say that startup businesses between up to 3 to 5 years, if you can make it past the 5 year marker, you're doing relatively good because most startup businesses don't make it past 5 years. 3 to 5 year window is the average. So we were no different than many others. We started getting to this point of growing pains where it was no longer the ability for me to just do everything, be the practitioner and the business owner and the the janitor and all that kind of good stuff. It wasn't possible. So you have to start hiring on people. And what you realize really quickly is that bringing on more people takes away or drives your expenses up and takes away your profit margin. So what I realized really quickly was is that we're growing fast, but also our expenses are also growing fast, and we're not making money anymore. So what we had to re-engineer it. You were using that word earlier, like what can we do in order to really make this work? And so what I realized is that if we could set this up really kind of in a military kind of um, a hierarchy of sorts, that we could really do some major things. So as a licensed physical therapist, I can do the evaluations, but I can't. But I can use. I'm the only one that can do evaluations, but I can use a physical therapy assistant to do treatments and that sort of thing. So it became a point where I was the PT and I had a couple of different PTAs under me, and we were able to see a whole lot of patients without as much cost. And we also restructured how we marketed too. Marketing is, of course, super critical. And in physical therapy, we're still primarily a referral-based business. And so, we now have a lot of places where we do have direct access. But back then, in 2007, 2008, if you weren't really marketing to doctors directly, it wasn't going to really help you. And I had started off with marketing to the consumers and to the particular patient base, and I had to re-engineer it back then. Now we're flipping it again, and now we're focused back on the consumer. So it's pretty funny. But
Yep.
back then, we had to really kind of change our focus and start knocking on doctors' doors to get referrals.
Yeah, that's funny, man. That's funny. Yeah, it is. I think it was Steve Jobs that said it. You have to reinvent your business every 3 to 5 years, otherwise the market will force you to do it.
That's right. That's right.
And typically you don't want to be forced to do anything. You know what I mean? You want to
No,
be doing like at least that turns into a little bit of reactivity.
that's right. That's
Yeah.
right.
That,
Yeah, it's one of those things like if you're not growing, you're dying. So you should be constantly looking for what's next and how can I grow and what's the next thing on the horizon I should focus on.
That's right. And as somebody who's, you've obviously got yourself out of that period of time where it was challenging. You've gone on to open multiple locations. So like, we have listeners from all different kinds of life, people that are, scaling clinics to just starting clinics, maybe quickly speak to the individual who's just getting started right now, and they feel that like they're busy, but like cash is tight, expenses are up, like you experienced. What's the first thing you tell them to do or look at inside of their business in order to kind of start breaking free from that?
Yeah, so first off, to create a scalable business, the most important thing you need to do is have processes and systems in place. And so when you're first starting off as a startup stage, you need to start writing down everything. Everything that I do, how am I doing it? What's the structure there? And it may not be a perfect process in the beginning, but at least you have something that you can start working on. And then keep in mind that the two biggest expenses you're going to have in any business is your people and then probably your rent expense or your mortgage. So those are the two things that you want to try to look at and try to control. And then, believe it or not, there's a lot of other small things that you can also control as well. You'd be surprised at how often often you can go and talk to a utility company and get a better rate, or talk to cable company, or whatever. There's ways you can get those prices down. One of the things I would definitely recommend as well is trying to stay away from those large interest business loans if you can. If you can use a line of credit that's revolving and you pay it off every month, is going to be more ideal. But what we see is a lot of small businesses end up getting themselves stuck in a lot of debt really quickly. And then if you're not making enough money, you can't really get yourself out of that hole.
Yeah, amen to that. Jim Rohn. I don't know if you know Jim Rohn. You know
I know
Jim Rohn.
Jim.
All right.
Yes,
What did Jim?
yes. I'm a
What
big
did?
fan of Jim Rohn.
All right. Well, we have to laugh at this one a little bit because Jim Rohn, he always had good life lessons, but he made them funny. He always
Uh,
said, "Yeah, I'm gonna take all these loans I got. I'm gonna go downtown. I'm gonna take all my really hard to pay loans. I'm gonna consolidate into one big impossible to pay loan."
I love it. I love it.
That's good though. But so like that's very elegant. I actually had not thought about being able to renegotiate some stuff too. You can always
Absolutely.
have that. You can always ask, right?
Yeah, you can always ask. And it's, I mean, in business, it's pennies it's all the little small things that really start to get you after a while. I mean, you want to look at the big things first, but then there's a lot of ways you can increase your profit margin by 2 to 5% just by cutting out the fat.
So
And
true.
so,
So
yes.
so true. And what's funny about that is like if a business grows at a very like let's say a very slow rate every year, right? What happens is eventually the business, no matter what, like in your case, you sound like you had just a lot of team and you just had to grow past that, and restructure a
Hmm.
little. But some businesses that like they're like, oh well, dude, I've been doing 100 grand a month, and I've been doing 100 grand a month for the last decade. I'm just not making the money I wanted to make. So what happens is like if they literally say if you're not growing, you're dying because the expenses will grow every year. So even
That's
if you
right.
sit at the same revenue, eventually your profit will just become eroded.
I agree 100%. And I think once we figured that out, it's just like you cannot stay stagnant. And you just have to grow. And believe it or not, as you start to grow, the business starts to grow. Like there's more people out there that you can touch. There's more lives that you can make a difference in. And so, if you it's I, it's you hear that a little, if you build it, they'll come kind of situation. That's not necessarily the case, but you definitely have to build yourself and put yourself in a position to grow.
Hmm. And right now, obviously, with like the target kind of focusing on your vision, because obviously, if anyone that listens to this show, you got to have a big vision. We're not one of those groups that are just like, oh, if I could just get
Right.
these lousy bills paid, we'll be good to go. Like we got to take it to the next level, and you're going to be doing that by
Yes,
2030. I always say this show is a method of accountability. 20 clinics by 2035.
that's right.
What's the as you look at your own business?
Hmm.
What's the single binding constraint for you that possibly might, if alleviated, would allow you to maybe get 20 clinics, maybe possibly in a shorter period of time?
So I have to go back to the point of just really kind of saying, okay, I've been in private practice for 15 years and I only have 4 clinics, right? Now, all of a sudden, I'm really excited and pushing to grow to 20 in the next 5 years. So what took me so long to get there? So I want to add, put that in.
Sure.
And that part is really understanding that you got to find a successful model that's repeatable, that's scalable. And if you don't really kind of look at your business as if it's a franchise and you really can't grow it to that level, it's just a different mindset. So what I had to do is say, okay, I need to create a model that's going to guarantee me a 20% net profit margin, um, re regardless of what I do. I need to make sure that I have the right people, the right processes, the right onboarding, the right training, so that we can put anyone in the seat and they can succeed. And so it really comes down to just writing all of those things out, not just the processes, but your job descriptions, your credos, your mission statements. Like everything's got to be in alignment. What do you want your culture to be? What do you want, what's your expectations from your team? KPIs, really, really important. what's your accountability measures to make sure that you can guarantee and define this success? So then once you have those things in place, it's really more turnkey. So then I know exactly what I'm looking for on the next clinic to open up because I have my ideal customer profile. I know what area I'm looking for because I know what works for me. And then if I find it, then we're turning it on and we're moving. So it's actually now it's a point where it's pretty easy. So it's
Yeah.
funny now we're having to be more strategic and say, okay, we can't open up 3 or 4 clinics at the same time. We have to slow this down a little bit, even though we have all these places that we think we could do really well in.
Yeah. It's funny. It takes so long to pioneer everything and build the model, but once you have it, it's easy to duplicate.
That's right.
It's like 10x is easier than 2x, as they say, you know?
Exactly, exactly. And it's
Yeah.
hard to believe that, but it really is. It gets easier. You
Yeah.
know, the bigger you grow, the easier it gets. And it compounds. So, I'm thinking once we get to 5 clinics, it'll be easy to get to 10. And when we get to 10, it'll be easy to get to 20. And so we just got to get to those major milestones.
It's just the multiplication effect right there.
Yes.
Yes. That's excellent. And so for you, like, obviously we talk a lot about like marketing, advertising, that kind of stuff on the show. When you look at your own business, do you guys, if there's a clinic owner who's listening and they're like, okay, dude, well, I'm at 1 now and I want to go to 2, and then when I want to go to 2, then I want to go to 4. How do you multiply the marketing? Is it on like an individual clinic level? Is it a macro brand level for you? How does that work?
I think it's a combination of all of those things, but I do think if you're wanting to grow your business, one thing you cannot kind of cheat on is marketing and advertising, right? So the nice thing is that as you grow, the cost of marketing and advertising can be divided between all of your different locations. So in a way, it gets a little bit cheaper even though you're paying more, it's cheaper per practice. What
Hmm.
we typically do is we do a little bit of everything, but we do Google ads, we do search engine optimization, we want to run ads based on the location. So if someone's looking for physical therapy in Sugar Land, which is one of our clinics, then our ads come up and it clicks. So you can set up marketing and advertising where it's really, really strategic and you're not spending money just in the shotgun approach. It's a very, very sniper type of approach. We do the same thing with our social media ads. We do community workshops where we're trying to get people in the community to come to our office for free training. And it's specifically geared to our ideal customer profile. We know what age group we're looking for, what income levels, what genders what type of industries and all that kind of good stuff. So we get really specific about that. When you figure out who your target audience is, that makes things a whole lot easier because then you can target them specifically.
Hmm. Yeah, and guys like we've talked about on the show before, to his point, that's why Dr. Sterling is making headway here because he's got his ICP, he's got the age, he's got the income, gender, what they're looking for,
That's right.
circumstances, problems, So like that's a big takeaway here, guys, is if you don't have your ICP, it's hard to know what's working or what's not because you're just kind of spraying and praying, right?
Yeah. And what I would recommend is that if you haven't done so, you can literally, as a practitioner, you can get a list of all your past patients, and there's companies out there you can send that database to, and they can run all of those patients through and start showing you where the similarities are. And so you can really kind of figure out, okay, so this is the patient the type of patient that works real well for me. And then you could even push out the ones you don't want to work with, right? Because there could be some that are low payers that are really more problem than what it's worth. So try to
Hmm.
find out that ICP. It's important.
It makes a lot of sense. And when you start, I'm always curious on the kind of just like the centralization of your whole system. Do you find that if you're running Google ads for one location, let's say you've got 2 locations, both are running Google ads, do you route all the leads to individual offices? Like each office has someone who handles leads, or do you like try to consolidate that into one call center? How do you do that all?
Yeah, we consolidated into one call center. I think there's, definitely probably a lot of different ways that you can do that, but we have a team of intake personnel, and they're just there to we want them to answer the phone by the second ring, every fax that comes in, because of course healthcare is still antiquated. We want
Hmm.
to reach out to them in real time. Any referrals that come through, we want to answer those. So it doesn't matter what location. Each person is able to handle the intake for that particular. So we just kind of have a central space for that.
Smart. I figure once
Mhm.
you get to a few locations, you might as well centralize that just to be systematic and
Yeah,
then just kind of cross place people.
exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
tons of sense. And so like, obviously being in the military, having high standards for yourself, your businesses, you always say that hiring great people is the game. What does great actually mean to you though? Like how do you screen for that? How do you find that?
Well, I mean, it's really, if you have to determine what the culture is of your practice, what you want it to be, and then you have to find people that will fit within that culture, because that's a really, really important piece. And if you don't have someone that's in sync with that, it's going to be a problem. For us, we want someone that genuinely wants to make a difference and wants to help people. If you are applying for a position and all you're concerned about is the salary, then you're not for us, because the salary is going to come, but we have to be aligned in our principles. So we're looking for someone who really wants a permanent home, that wants to stay here for a long haul, that wants to values being invested in, because we invest in our employees, we provide education, training, and we actually have our own patented treatment approach. We call it the Sterling treatment method, and we train them up on how to do that. And it's really about taking care of the patient and treating them as if they were our grandparent or parent, aunt, uncle, giving them that unparalleled experience. And so they just have to really understand and get what we're trying to do. And if it's not for them, it's just not for them. We even do a kind of what would you call it? On the job training interview, where
Hmm.
we'll screen them. We'll see them again face to face, and then we'll put them actually on the floor and watch them interact with patients and see how they communicate and to see if it works.
And to be clear, you're doing that for like a certain level like of talent, like physical therapy and other
So
therapists,
all of our doctors,
yep.
we put them through that. But even the admin. So if it's a patient care coordinator, which is our front desk, we'll put them at the front desk for 2 hours. We'll say, hey, you've made it to this level. We want to see you come in and work with our team. The team gets a chance to talk to them. We get a chance to see them, even interact with our patients when they come in, as far as like just saying hello and checking in with them. How are they friendly? Are they articulate? Do they have a great personality? So we're looking for all those things.
That makes sense. And do you do you ever find yourself like you do any probationary period with staff to make sure the culture is
Yeah,
aligned?
yeah, yeah. We always do a 90-day probationary period.
You
So
laugh when you say that. Did you not do that? Did you not do that forever, or was that
no, no,
always
no.
a thing?
I just laugh because I don't know what we would do without that. Yeah,
Okay,
it's
cool. Okay, cool.
because it's so critical, because people can interview really, really well, and they can sell you on a dream. And then once you get them in, everything that was talked about in the interview process is not the same. So we want to make sure that we have the right fit.
Yeah, that makes sense. Obviously, you want to try and do your due diligence and get it right the first time, but at the end of the day, hiring is still best guess, you know?
Yeah, it is. It is. And it's a big financial investment. You're investing in time, money, education, and to get someone completely trained up and to lose them in 30 and 90 days or 6 months, you don't want that. So it's really important to pick the right person.
Yeah, makes sense. And what's your I hear different answers all the time on this, and I'm always curious. What's your involvement? in the hiring process? Are you still rapidly involved in talking with all like certain level and above? How do you delineate who you're going to talk to on the hire?
Great question. So we do a panel interview process, and it's usually the third phase. And I'm not typically a part of the initial binding screening, the phone screening, I usually come in on that panel phase, and there's usually at least five leadership individuals on that call, and then we together vote. And then after that, they're kind of gone on and flying. They go through our onboarding and process and the training, all that kind of good stuff is taken care of. So the only other time that I see them is there's one day during the onboarding process where when I want to talk about culture and mission and values, and I think they need to hear that piece from me. But outside of that, I'm usually outside of the picture.
Yeah, that makes tons of sense. And you control like the onboarding process in terms of like you have everybody go through a series of the core value training, mission training, that kind of stuff. How do you design that protocol?
Yeah, great question. So we used MedBridge is a big continuing education platform that has thousands of training videos on it. And then what we've done is we've selected the training videos that resonated with our culture and what we needed. And we have everyone go through those training videos. And then we have everyone set up with a mentor. And so that's within their same, job description. So if it's a doctor of physical therapy, they have another mentor to mentor them. And then we have a full mentorship program that happens. So the first year is usually they're usually part of that mentorship program. And then once they finish the first year, they get to decide on what track they want to go in. So if they want to be clinic director, then they can go down a clinic director leadership track. If they're wanting to go into entrepreneurship, I'm really big on that. I'll help you work on projects and things that are on the entrepreneur side. Or if you want to do a clinical track where you just want to become the best clinician with the most specialties, then we take them down that track. But we really want to show them how we're going to invest in them, the next 3 to 5 years. And as long as they're a part of us, we're a part of them.
So smart. So you're able to kind of like identify the goals of the
Hmm.
individual early on and then kind of help tailor the experience a little bit to that.
Exactly. So in the military, it's all about putting the right people in the right seats. And typically in the military, if you stay in long enough, you're going to become a leader in some form or fashion. But there's a long process of figuring out what direction we're going to place you in and what's best for you. And so
So
that's what
smart.
we wanted to do.
That's
And
so
so it works out pretty well.
That's so smart. You hear a lot of people that like are so afraid to like invest in their team because they're weird that they might not stick around forever. What would you say, what
Yeah.
would you say to somebody like that who has that mindset?
You got to put it in. So the thing about in the military, we call it servant leadership, is putting someone else's needs in front of yours, is that it creates more loyalty, not less. So the more you put into someone, the more you're going to get out. So the more that we put into our team, the more loyal they are and more likely they are to stay. And then we want to make sure that they understand that as we grow, there's going to be opportunities for them to grow as well. So we even have a profit sharing model where every single full-time employee has an ability to share in the profits on a quarterly basis. So we share 10% of our profits with every single full-time employee. And so it's just, we just have a different model that just works. Yeah.
So
Doesn't
smart.
work for everyone. So but sometimes we get some bad hires and they
Uh,
gotta go, but
what
but
speaking of which, well, maybe that's a good one. What would you say is your personal biggest mistake when it comes to hiring? Looking back on what you know now.
I think it's twofold. So when you're trying to find someone to put in the right culture and all that kind of good stuff, there's two ways that you can go wrong. You can go with someone that's really, really experienced that you think would be a great asset, but what you find is that they don't want to change. They're kind of stuck in their ways. And so
Yeah.
being able to fall within your culture is really difficult. Or you can get someone that's way too young and they're still trying to figure it out. So they're, and especially with our younger generations, it's all about, okay, I just want to learn a little bit and go to the next place and the next place. So you just have to just kind of try to find someone who's in here for the long haul, who's open to learning and following a culture, but with having autonomy as well. So it's all those things you gotta look for.
Yeah, makes sense. And yeah, obviously there's a lot of like clinical advice. This is kind of a maybe a contrarian question for you. What do you feel like is the most like overrated advice that, clinic owners keep hearing about growth that you might fundamentally disagree with?
So the one thing I always tell, anyone wanting to go into private practice, everyone thinks that you have to take every training course alive. You have to have all these different specialties and all this kind of good stuff in order to open up a practice and be successful. And it's almost the complete opposite of that. I won't say it's the complete opposite. You want to be informed, but just know that you're going to make mistakes regardless. You just have to get started. And the younger that you are, the more energy you have and the less responsibilities that you have, the better, because you can put 60, 80 hours in every single week. And by the time you get to a point where the business is doing really, really well, then you can really start focusing maybe a little bit more on family and all that kind of good stuff. The other thing I would say is that there's no work-life balance. When you're a business owner, you just have to incorporate your work and life together and just see how you can mirror the two. So finding a partner that really is okay with that and understands that if you're marrying a business owner, there's a lot of pluses, but then there's some sacrifices as well.
Yeah, well said, well said. I think that's kind of the illusion, of like
Hmm.
the passiveness of the business and like, I don't want to work for someone, I'm gonna work for myself, but then you're just like working all the time.
That's it. And it never, I don't know. I just like I remember thinking, okay, if I could just get to year five, if I could just get to year eight, I can just coast. And you cannot coast because I think we were talking about this earlier, because if you're not growing, you're dying. You've got to really be looking for the next opportunity because especially now in these days, with AI and technology and everything that's happening, it's changing so quickly. You have to always just keep your eye on the prize.
Well said. Speaking of looking for opportunity, as you go about fulfilling your own mission of 20 clinics by 2030, how are you going about finding new opportunity in terms of like, real estate and places to consider putting the business and like ultimately that decision making process of like, where are we going to put these companies?
Yeah, so we're doing a couple of things. We're looking at, okay, because there's a few different ways to grow, right? You could start in a brand new area from the ground up, trying to reestablish or establish your brand in that area, or you can purchase an existing business that already has a number of patients coming in and has a brand, and we just come in and just you know change the culture a little bit and make it our own. And a lot of times that can be an easier way to do that. And then you can open up within a 3 to 5 mile radius from your existing clinic, so your brand is still there. You still have some existing patients and you can grow that way. We look at all those different scenarios, and it really just depends on the opportunity. So we have some de novo clinics that we're looking at that are too far away, so that we will have to kind of rebrand ourselves because they don't know the brand. And then we also the one that we're opening up in 3 months is, it's just about 5 miles down the road, so that'll be an easy kind of a open and go. But the ICP on the one that's a little bit farther away is perfect for us. So we just have to brand ourselves and get it going. So
That makes sense. So if you basically the thought is if you have like a local brand, it's easy to kind of just like start from scratch and kind of build off each other. But maybe if you're going a little further away where you're not as known, buy something that already is working and then kind of merge into it.
exactly. Exactly. That's the easiest way to do it. And sometimes it's less costly because when you start looking at the cost for build out and the cost for all the supplies and equipment and all that kind of good stuff, nowadays you can go in and you can do an acquisition or a merger, a buyout, and you can set up a really sweet deal where maybe you're putting up a little bit up front and then you're paying it out over time, over months. And, it a lot of times can come out really on, you come out on the upside. So
Yeah,
something to consider.
yeah, well said, brother. That's great, man. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you. And I always like to ask I have one last kind of hypothetical question I'll ask you. And
Hmm.
so put on your thinking cap. So this one is if you lost everything, meaning you woke up tomorrow and you had no money, no resources, no clinics, no connections, but the same brain and knowledge base that you have currently sitting here today, what would you do over the next 30 days to begin building back what you already have built for yourself?
So, I think that everything in life is based on your relationships, your network. If I lost all of my money, lost, businesses, all that kind of good stuff. I would start with calling people that I know and talking to the people that know, like, and trust me, and started looking for opportunities that they may have that they could present to me. But no one becomes successful on their own or alone. And so if we understand that life is about relationships and building those relationships, they always give back. So if you're always giving out into the universe, it will give back to you. Even if you lose everything, it'll come back to you.
It's a classic version of good karma, my friend, you know?
Yes, yes.
Yes, that's excellent. Well, nice work. We're excited to continue the discussion on your journey to 20 clinics by 2030. So excellent. If you had a place that people could find more about you, maybe they resonated with what you said today on today's discussion, where could they find you, Dr. Sterling?
Yeah, so our office website is www.sterlingtherapy.com. My personal website is www.drdrsterlingcarter.com. And then you can find that's my same handle, social media handle. So you can go to Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn. We got a lot of good stuff out there, so easy to find.
Excellent. Well, guys, if you got value from that, make sure number one, you check out more of Dr. Sterling's work inside of his businesses. And if you got value from the show, make sure you share it forward with somebody who needs to hear it. Remember, we grow organically around here. So we appreciate you being here, Dr. Sterling. And guys,
It's been a pleasure. Thank you,
hope you
Jeff.
absolutely, sir. Hope you guys got a lot of value from today's discussion too, and continue your own journey to building wildly profitable and impactful clinics. All right, my friends, we'll see you in the next one. Cheers.
Cheers.